In 1965, a young, single perfume salesman in New York City had a very simple, very relatable problem. He wanted to meet women, and he could not find anywhere good to do it. So he took his savings, opened a bar on the Upper East Side, and built the kind of place he wished existed. Somewhere fun, lively, and respectable where young single people could actually mingle. He named it after the most joyful phrase he could think of: "Thank God it's Friday." He had no idea he was about to invent an entire category of American life: the singles bar, the casual restaurant chain, the whole modern concept of going out as we came to know it. TGI Fridays did not just open a restaurant, it created a blueprint that thousands of restaurants would copy for the next 50 years. And then, in 2024, that very same TGI Fridays filed for bankruptcy, a faded relic closing locations all across the country, a ghost of the cultural juggernaut it had once been. This is the strange, swinging, and ultimately tragic rise and fall of TGI Fridays. To understand just how revolutionary TGI Fridays was, you first have to understand what it was actually like to be young and single in America in the early 1960s. And the honest answer is that, socially speaking, it was kind of grim. If you were a single young professional hoping to meet people, your options were bleak. Bars were mostly dark, seedy, male-dominated places, and a respectable single woman simply did not walk into a bar by herself, because it was not done. There was essentially no public space designed for young men and women to casually meet, flirt, and socialize, because the culture just had not built one yet. Enter Alan Stillman. He was in his 20s, single, working in the fragrance business, and living on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, a neighborhood absolutely packed with young, single stewardesses, secretaries, and professionals. He could see all these eligible young people all around him, and there was nowhere for any of them to actually connect. So in 1965, Stillman scraped together about $10,000, some of it, reportedly, borrowed from his mother, and bought a rundown bar on First Avenue. He painted it in cheerful red and white stripes, hung up some quirky decorations, and threw open the doors. And what happened next was pure lightning in a bottle, because the place was an instant, jaw-dropping sensation. On its opening weekend, the crowds were reportedly so big that police had to set up barricades to control them, and young people lined up around the block just for a chance to get inside. Word spread like wildfire, and soon TGI Fridays was not just a bar, it was the place. Celebrities, models, the young and the beautiful and the ambitious all crowded in. Other entrepreneurs saw those lines snaking around the block and rushed to copy it, and a whole new nightlife genre was born practically overnight. But everyone knew exactly where it had all started. Stillman had stumbled onto something enormous. He had created what is widely credited as the first true singles bar, a bright, safe, fun, socially acceptable place where young men and women could come specifically to meet one another. It was the perfect venue for the dawning sexual revolution, and the timing could not possibly have been better. It is almost funny when you think about it, because one lonely guy trying to improve his own dating life had accidentally built a machine for everyone else's. Stillman would later joke that he opened the bar essentially to meet girls, and it worked spectacularly, just not in the way he expected. He did not just find a date, he found a fortune and a permanent place in restaurant history. TGI Fridays became a genuine cultural phenomenon, the beating heart of swinging singles New York. It is often credited as an inspiration for the bar scene in the famous book and film Looking for Mr. Goodbar, and it was the site of countless first dates, romances, and more than a few marriages. By many accounts, it was, for a time, the single most famous, most happening bar in the entire country. And it pioneered an entire aesthetic, one you have absolutely seen even if you never set foot in the original. The brass railings, the Tiffany-style stained glass lamps, the walls absolutely covered in quirky antiques and old bric-a-brac, and hanging ferns and plants everywhere. This look became known as the Fern Bar, and the original Fridays was its prototype, the template a whole wave of imitators would copy and eventually put a name to. It pioneered the experience too. The bartenders were not just pouring drinks, they were performers, flipping bottles and putting on a show. This flair bartending became so iconic that when Hollywood built an entire Tom Cruise movie around it, Cocktail, the man hired to train crews to flip those bottles was a champion of TGI Fridays' own bartending competition. Fridays helped popularize a whole generation of fun, flashy cocktails, because going to Fridays was never really about the food. It was about the vibe. Even the staff became part of the show. The servers wore those iconic red and white striped shirts and suspenders, with a whole chest full of pins and buttons, the original flair. The entire place was engineered, top to bottom, to feel like a non-stop party that you, somehow, had been lucky enough to get invited to. And the food, frankly, was almost beside the point at first. People did not pack into TGI Fridays for some transcendent meal. They came for the energy, the noise, the laughter, the sense that something fun might be about to happen, that you might just meet someone, that it was Friday and anything was possible. Stillman had bottled a feeling, and a feeling, it turns out, is a far more powerful product than a hamburger. And here is the truly important part. As TGI Fridays expanded out of New York and across the country through franchising, it carried that entire formula with it. The festive decor, the loaded menu of appetizers and burgers and ribs, the full bar, the upbeat staff, the welcoming atmosphere. And in doing so, it created the template for an entirely new kind of restaurant: casual dining, the mid-priced, sit-down, fun but not fancy chain restaurant. Before TGI Fridays, that category barely existed in the form we know today. And after it, that category went on to absolutely take over America. Think about every restaurant that came afterward and borrowed the formula. Applebee's, Chili's, Bennigan's, Ruby Tuesday, the entire world of the suburban bar and grill, the flair on the walls, the 2-for-1 appetizers, the servers singing happy birthday. All of it traces directly back to what Alan Stillman built on First Avenue. TGI Fridays was the original, and everyone else was just a remix. By the height of the casual dining era, the competition between these chains had become its own kind of war. Fridays versus Bennigan's versus Applebee's versus Chili's, all battling over the same suburban shopping center parking lots, all serving the same loaded potato skins and frozen margaritas, all descended from the very same original idea. It was an entire category that Alan Stillman had conjured out of nothing, now worth tens of billions of dollars. Through the 1980s and 1990s, TGI Fridays rode that wave to enormous heights, growing into a massive international chain with hundreds upon hundreds of locations spread across America and around the globe. It was a giant, an institution, and for millions of people, simply where you went. At its peak, TGI Fridays operated something like 600 or more restaurants in the United States alone, plus hundreds more scattered across dozens of countries around the world. For a brand that had begun as one guy's scheme to meet girls on First Avenue, it had become a genuine global empire, those red and white stripes recognized on multiple continents. But the thing about defining an era is that eras, sooner or later, end. And the two great waves that TGI Fridays had ridden all the way to the top, the singles revolution and the casual dining boom, were both, eventually, going to crash. For a long while though, none of that seemed to matter. TGI Fridays was riding high, opening location after location, a sure bet in shopping centers across the world. And success has a way of making a company stop asking the hard questions. Why fix what is working? And why change a formula that is printing money? But the seeds of the fall were already in the soil, planted, ironically, by the very forces that had made it great. The first wave to fade was the one that had started it all, the singles bar. As the decades rolled on, the entire culture of meeting people changed, and the novelty of the Fern bar wore off. And then technology eventually delivered the killing blow. Because why fight through a crowded bar to meet someone when you could swipe through 100 strangers on your phone from the comfort of your couch? The singles bar, as a concept, slowly became obsolete. But by then, TGI Fridays had long since grown past being just a singles bar. It was now a giant casual dining chain. So the bigger, far more dangerous threat was the slow, grinding death of casual dining itself. Starting in the 2000s and accelerating hard through the 2010s, the casual dining category began to crumble, and it got squeezed from both sides at once. On one side came fast casual. Places like Chipotle and Panera offered food that felt fresher, faster, and more honest, at a similar price with no server and no 20-minute wait. Because why sit down for a mediocre chain burger when you could build a custom burrito in 5 minutes flat? On the other side, younger diners increasingly craved authenticity and experience. Local spots, food halls, interesting global cuisines, places that felt real and worth posting about. And a giant corporate chain serving mass-produced mozzarella sticks beneath fake antiques bolted to the wall was the exact opposite of that. It felt dated, it felt hollow, and it felt like your parents' idea of a fun night out. And TGI Fridays was trapped right in that squeezed middle. Too slow and pricey to beat fast casual, and not special or authentic enough to be a real destination. That famous flair on the walls, which the movie Office Space had so brutally mocked, started to feel less like fun and a lot more like a sad corporate relic. And there is something almost poetic in that. Office Space had skewered the forced, mandatory fun of the casual chain restaurant, the manager nagging an employee for more pieces of flair, and audiences laughed because they recognized it instantly. The cultural verdict had become that this place was fake, the fun was manufactured, and nobody actually wanted to be there. And when your entire concept becomes a national punchline for inauthenticity, you are in very, very deep trouble. Sales began to slide, and as they did, the company fell into the same doom loop that has killed so many chains. Falling revenue led to cost cutting. Cost cutting hurt the food and the experience. Worse food and experience drove away even more customers. And around it spun, the spiral tightening with every single turn. And a doom loop is brutal precisely because every move you make to survive seems to dig the hole a little deeper. Because cut the staff and the service turns slow and grumpy. Cut the ingredients and the food gets sadder. And cut the marketing and people simply forget you exist. Each decision is locally rational and collectively fatal. TGI Fridays, like so many dying chains before it, was being forced to slowly cannibalize the very things that had once made it special. In 2014, with the chain already wobbling, TGI Fridays was sold off for more than $800 million to a pair of private equity firms, in a leveraged buyout that, true to form, loaded the company down with debt. And the new owners inherited the brutally difficult task of trying to fix a brand that the entire culture was steadily walking away from. They closed underperforming locations, tried to modernize the menu and the decor, and chased delivery and takeout. But it was like trying to bail out a boat with a steadily growing hole in the bottom. The fundamental problem, that fewer and fewer people actually wanted what a 1980s casual dining chain was selling, simply never went away. Then came the pandemic, and for a business built entirely around people gathering, drinking, and lingering together inside a restaurant, it was devastating. The dining rooms went dark. The crowds that had been Friday's whole reason for existing simply vanished, and many of them never fully came back. For a brand already sliding, COVID did not start the fire. It poured gasoline on it. Locations that had been limping along suddenly could not survive at all. And when the restrictions finally lifted, the diners who returned overwhelmingly chose either the cheap convenience of fast casual and delivery, or the special experience of a real local restaurant. The big, middle-of-the-road chain was precisely the kind of place people no longer bothered with. The company grew desperate. In the spring of 2024, it agreed to a $220 million deal to merge with its own biggest franchisee, the company that ran Fridays in the United Kingdom. A last-ditch move designed to take the brand public and raise the cash for a turnaround. And then came the twist that tells you exactly how far things had fallen. Years earlier, Fridays had borrowed against its own brand, pledging the royalty payments from its franchisees as collateral. And in September of 2024, its creditors declared the company in breach and seized control of that royalty stream, the very asset the buyer wanted. The buyer walked away. The deal collapsed just weeks before the end, and with it went the last real hope of a rescue. And then the end finally arrived. In November of 2024, TGI Fridays filed for bankruptcy. The company that had invented the singles bar, that had birthed the entire casual dining category, that had once been the most happening restaurant in all of America, was now insolvent, abruptly shutting down dozens upon dozens of its US locations as it scrambled to survive in some smaller form. The collapse was staggering in scale. A chain that had once boasted around 600 bustling American restaurants had, by the time it filed for bankruptcy, shriveled to fewer than 200. A stunning, slow-motion collapse. And the striped awnings that had once promised a guaranteed good time were going dark all across the country. It is worth pausing on just how complete the reversal was. This was the brand that other restaurants had spent 50 years imitating, the trendsetter, the original. And now it was the cautionary tale, the punchline, the symbol of an entire category's decline. The teacher had become the warning. For anyone who had grown up on those mozzarella sticks and birthday sundaes, watching it happen was a strange, low-grade kind of grief. Not a shocking, sudden death, but more like running into an old friend and realizing, with a jolt, just how much they had aged and how far they had fallen since the last time you had really paid attention. TGI Fridays has not vanished completely, and the brand lives on, especially internationally, where franchises in other countries still proudly carry the name, and where, ironically, the very American casual dining experience that feels so tired back home can still feel novel and fun abroad. But the great American empire that Alan Stillman built had, for all practical purposes, collapsed. So what is the real lesson of TGI Fridays? It is a subtle and honestly kind of poignant one, because TGI Fridays did not fail by doing something wrong. In a strange way, it failed precisely because of the very thing that made it brilliant in the first place. TGI Fridays was the perfect product of its moment. Alan Stillman built exactly the right thing at exactly the right time, and he did it twice, nailing the singles revolution of the 1960s, and then watching the formula he created go on to nail the casual dining boom of the 80s and 90s. For decades, it was perfectly in tune with what America wanted out of a night out. But being perfectly in tune with one era is a surprisingly dangerous thing, because the culture never, ever stops moving. The way people dated changed, the way people ate changed, and the very meaning of going out changed. And TGI Fridays, so deeply and so perfectly built for the world of 1975 and 1985, was slow and ultimately unable to reinvent itself for the world of 2025. The flair on the walls never changed, but everything around it did. And the pioneer that had taught America how to go out got left behind by an America that had simply learned to go out differently. Alan Stillman himself, for what it is worth, did just fine, going on to build a legendary steakhouse empire and becoming a giant of the restaurant world in his own right. But the original idea, the lightning he had caught in a bottle on First Avenue back in 1965, had finally, quietly, run its course. Because that is the bittersweet truth about defining an era, that the very thing that makes you a phenomenon, being the perfect mirror of your moment, is the exact same thing that turns you into a relic once that moment passes. TGI Fridays threw the party that an entire generation grew up on. And then, slowly, one by one, the guests grew up, moved on, and stopped coming back. until eventually, somebody had to turn off the lights and lock the door. So here's the question I will leave you with. Which restaurant chain from your childhood do you miss the most? And which one, still standing today, do you think is next to fall? Drop it in the comments and let's argue about it. And if you made it all the way here, do us a favor, like the video, hit subscribe, and stick around, because there are plenty more of these coming.